my daughter came home and said, I want to marry somebody, and she said, he's a Sikh, I'd be happy.
About society and what does society say, and you've got to love yourself from within. Where is that going to start? It's going to start from your clothes.
In this desire to want to be independent or different, you know, what we get is a lot of young people thinking, oh, thanks very much for that, I'm going to go off and do my own thing.
Waiguru ka Khalsa, Waiguru ki Fateh. Welcome to a brand new show called Kaurs Corner. My name's Baljit Kaur. We're going to be chatting about social and practical issues that affect women in today's society. Hi ladies.
Hello.
So what do you think about parents who dictate to their children that they should be a certain way and they should do certain things that the parents want them to do as opposed to what they want to do in life? Is this something that's of an issue, a growing issue in today's society?
I think definitely it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, or our generation who are now hitting our 40s and 50s. Parental control was there were very strict parameters, and for our parents as well. I think things are definitely changing now about responsibilities. In those days, it was very much not only what parents' responsibilities to their children were, but what children's responsibilities to their parents were, very much. But I think the society we live in today, it's very much about what parents are doing for their children and not so much the other way around. So it's gone perhaps, I feel, too much the other way, where parents have to do all the hard work, but as a point of children, they don't have too many responsibilities towards their parents.
So do you think that children don't appreciate maybe what their parents are doing, or actually understand the actual value of how much their parents are doing in terms of what they're sacrificing?
I think it's a Western phenomenon, isn't it? If you look at Western culture, that's really very much about, you know, your job is to bring your children up, and at a certain age, be it at 18 or 21, depending on which class of background you're from, you'll say to your children, off you go into the wide world, you know, and that's a very British or English phenomenon. I think that's rubbed off, but I think what we're finding in our culture, which is, I think, a little bit more concerning, is that you have children who want it both ways. So they want their parents to pay for everything, and they want everything done, and that's us being British, but then they don't want to do it the other way around. So when it suits them, you know, we want to be Indian, so Mum, you know, can you wash our clothes, can you clean for us, can you cook our meals for uni? But when it suits them, they want to be British, and I think that's where the real problem comes for our generations moving forward, because we can't, I think it's unfair to hop between the two. If you want your parents to be funding your university, for instance, which isn't necessarily something that some British parents do, but then equally I think you have to at least respect them for that, you know.
But do you, I mean, I think if parents are going to the point where they're spending, you know, and investing an awful lot into their children's future, i.e. private schooling, universities, you know, do they then not have the right to tell their children what they expect of them, and I don't know, maybe things like who they should marry, you know, how they should sort of live, or, you know,
I think the role as a parent, perhaps, when you're talking about, you know, telling them what children should or shouldn't do, I think there's definitely a place for that, but perhaps it's when the child is a little bit younger, to guide them in the right direction, to nurture them, to ensure that they're instilled with the correct family values, and to know, you know, what perhaps would be nice, you know, for the parents to expect of their children. But I think when a child gets to a certain age, inevitably a parent has to accept that, you know, you've brought them up as far as you can, and they've got a brain in their head. They need to use that and find their own path in life, really.
There's that saying, isn't there? Sorry, go on.
I think in terms of when you're saying like paying for stuff and, you know, fees and stuff like that, I think parents are used to doing it, like they feel like they have to, or like they're expected to. But I do think young adults nowadays, they actually crave for that independence, and I think it's important for them to have it as well. You know, they should find their own way, you know, earn their own money and pay for things themselves. I mean, it is important to have that, and I think we are moving towards it. But a lot of Asian parents nowadays, they still feel the need to get involved, and which, to be honest, it's not a bad thing. It's good to have that older opinion. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, a lot of our parents are right about a lot of things, aren't they?
I think they do, because they want to safeguard their children, and they want them to understand the you know, the right path and maybe the wrong path in certain cases. But see, I know maybe people where they've invested so much into their in their children's education, and really put so much emphasis on careers and how they turn out. But then if that child then turns around and says, well, you know, I'm now going to do what I want to do, and in fact I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to marry somebody completely outside of Sikhi. So as a parent, do you feel as though maybe you should have had a say in that, as a parent who's brought you up to that age and put so much emphasis on your education to get you educated to the point where you've done so well and progressed in career as well, but then they've kind of thrown it back in your face by saying, well, no, I'm not even going to seek your opinion, I'm just going to marry who I want to marry.
So the thing is, I think, when you invest heavily in your children's future and you want them to become educated and articulate and make their own choices, I think that will come as part and parcel of what the kind of sort of self-sufficient young adults that you want them to be. So you have to accept that will come with their own choices in life, and that will it's one thing. So we can't have it both. We can't have them being subservient to our choices. They will make their own decisions, and it's their journey.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think there's that old saying, Indian saying, in fact, that if your child's boot starts fitting your boot, then you need to change your tact from being parent-child to being a friend, you know. And I think that the difference here is that, are you telling your children, are you guiding and supporting your children?
I think communication is so important. Like, even I felt, you know, as I've been growing up, you know, I've always been asked, you know, you know, what do you want to do? You know, we're not... You know, it's important not to force the child and mould them to what you want them to be. It's important to communicate with them. You know, sometimes they might, you know, say ideas that, you know, aren't realistic, but, you know, that's the whole point of growing up. But you shouldn't just discard it completely. You should...
Because I think that's a valid point there, Amadee, that you have, that children almost now, especially now in this day and age, expect their parents to be a friend as well as a parent. And I think still some parents miss that point. And they're very sort of dictating in a way that, you know, you should do this. And I think maybe that's where it's going wrong, you know, where you're not being a friend, you're not actually listening, and you're not actually understanding.
And are we investing too much? Because, you know, if parents are investing so much into their parents, what are they giving up and sacrificing in their own lives that they then seek to fulfill through their children? So, you know, are they putting so much effort in, and should they take a step back and balance? And I know it's harder, it's easier to say than to do, but I constantly, this reminds me of that saying of Khalil Gibran, who says that your children are not of you but from you, and they go forth like an arrow in a bow. They'll move forward, so that their position is always going to progress on top of yours. You know, there's always going to be a difference and change, and as parents, I think you have to accept that, although I don't have any children. So,
do you think maybe from a parent's perspective it's more of a control thing? And you know, and maybe they're wanting their child to aspire to become X, Y, or Z because the society expects it, so that the parents are maybe getting pressure.
I mean, I've got children who are of that kind of university age and who've been through, and you know, when you were saying about people investing in their children's education, and a lot of what I've seen in our community is that control thing, because when the children fall slightly short. For example, when my daughter had her A-level results and she missed the mark by a few, and she needed my support and encouragement, and that's exactly what she got. But I was really gobsmacked to see my peers. There were some parents there who were really livid at their children because that's where the control and the how heavily have I invested in my child's future. Is it about me or is it about my child?
But see, that's where balance is important as well. That's why, you know, in most families, you have two parents. One is probably more disciplinary and, in that aspect, and the other one's more, communicating. But it is important to have two aspects. You can't just have both controlling parents or both, very...
But being a disciplinarian and controlling your children are two different things.
Yeah,
I'm the
that's
strict
true.
parent in our family. I'm much stricter than my husband. But that doesn't mean that when the children don't achieve what they aspire to, that I won't be there to support them and hold them up.
Yeah. And that's about setting values and standards and boundaries rather than about controlling the child's will.
What about looking at it from a different angle? What about from a Sikhi perspective? Now, if you've invested in that child and you've brought them up and again with the education, and they've gone to university, they've got first, second class degree, and then they refuse to follow the Sikhi principles that you've almost embedded.
I think you have to accept they're on their own journey.
How as a parent does that?
It's hard.
But look at it from a Sikhi perspective. In our Guru Granth Sahib Ji in Gurbani, what it talks about is that every individual is responsible for their own being and self. So what we do as individuals carries as our it carries as our account. If we do bad, then we get bad. If we do good, we can, even to the extent where in Sikhi they talk about, even in marriage relationships or parent-child relationships, that none of that matters in the end. What matters is how you conduct yourself. So at the end of the day, we might want to control our children, or we might want to... The best thing we can do for our children is to put good values in them, make them fully aware of where they come from and where they're going, so that they have those support mechanisms in. So when they do, when they do wobble in life, and we all do, that they know that they can turn to us. Otherwise, that's the best we can do. We can't live their life for them.
But that's what Sikhi says as well. You can't force a person to be a good Sikh. You guide a person, you teach them values, and then it is up to them, because we are individual people. You cannot force things on a person, and that's where...
And our values in Sikhism are absolutely brilliant if you think about it. It is a very contemporary religion. Therefore, the thinking in terms of relationships of men and women, parents, it's very, very accessible as a religion. And I think sometimes our desire to indoctrinate that strictness around the religion actually puts our children away from what the religion is about, because actually if you look at the meaning of what the religion is about, it's very accessible, and most young people would find it attractive, but sometimes the whole practicing side of it puts people off.
I had a very interesting thought the other day when I was thinking about how teenagers and young people question their children, and I was thinking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji being so contemporary in the thinking and so ahead of their time that, when his parents were sort of trying to enforce something on him that he knew wasn't true to God, how he questioned those things, and it was almost like a rebellious thing, and our children could relate to that, and we have to accept that they will question the status quo, and that's not always a bad thing, because that makes us stretch our own thinking. So sometimes it reinforces your own values, your own spirituality, while they're finding their journey. Maybe that's why it's sort of almost predestined that those children will come into our homes as our children, in those relationships. So there's a sort of spiritual element to it, and questioning is part and part of the sort of that life cycle that we go through, isn't it? It's a healthy thing, and we shouldn't feel too challenged. And I think historically in generations gone by it was very much children shouldn't question, they shouldn't have, but they have a purity of thought, and they're very there's a clarity in the way they think sometimes.
See, I think that's still acceptable. The main issue that lies for parents is having a say and sort of control within marriage, and having a say in who they marry. In terms of career, profession, what they want to study, it's acceptable. Children have their own say.
That's the point that I was trying to make when I was talking about children not then doing what the parents say. It is predominantly about marriage and who they marry. Well, not even who. but maybe somebody within the sort of religion within Sikhi. But do the children have a right to then determine who they get married to, or should they at least owe that much to their parents who have seen them through the education and say, well, you know, my parents did all this for me, maybe I should just give something back to them.
But you're talking about the parent having the right to say who that child should marry, but what's the flip side? Say that that child does marry a person of the parent's choice, that necessarily may not work, and you know, inevitably it's a marriage doomed for failure, you know, perhaps.
Yeah. And that happens so much within our culture now. You know, within the first year, so many marriages break down, and sometimes they are love marriages, let's be honest, and sometimes they're arranged marriages, and it's often because individuals aren't ready to get married in the first place, you know. And I think, I mean, I don't know if I agree that marriage is the only thing, because you can get pushy parents on everything, whether it's what you're studying, how well you do within your studying, or how you bring up your children. I mean, it can go on and on and on, the legacy. I think the issue is the flip side, in terms of what impact does that have on that individual when that relationship becomes so controlling? What you're doing is you are absolutely killing the confidence of your child.
You
stifle them, absolutely.
But when you're saying, like, in terms of, obviously marriages, you know, they don't work sometimes because parents have too much say. But the thing is, sometimes parents feel they have to have a say before the marriage and afterwards as well. That might be the problem as well. Parents are having control.
Too much control.
All through the life, not even just up until marriage, you know what I mean? Maybe parents are too involved in that sense.
Is it because parents, some parents feel that they, or they just are naturally controlling, or is it a thing in society? Are they trying to keep a control of their children and want their children to do certain things because they're so afraid of what people in that social circle are going to say?
Definitely.
You know, the senior,
it's almost like a status symbol for them, that their children are very obedient to them and do exactly what they want.
Because they're afraid of people saying senior te innu paise kharchiya unna nu padhai vi ਕੀਤੀ ਆ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਵੀ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ ਵੀ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ and ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੰਨੀ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, you know.
But it's
so
a big
that
thing
concept,
though,
isn't there?
Yeah,
Well,
there is.
why they're looking after you, why they're living with you now, you know. So
and it is very
it
difficult,
that?
but even sometimes it's even more simpler than that, which is, doesn't matter which background you are, when it comes to letting go of your children, be it through marriage or when they go to university. I'm not even a parent, but I can imagine how difficult that transition must be, as so many other transitions are within our life. And actually most parents struggle then because they don't know what to do with themselves. They've spent 20 years, you know, they've spent 20 odd years, you know, focusing, purely sacrificing everything about themselves for their children, and all of a sudden it's an empty
really
nest.
hard. I mean,
you know?
my daughter went to, just to give you an example, went on a trip in year 5 of school, and it was for a week, so it was the first time, and she was only, about 10 years old, if that. And she's going away for the first time on a trip for a week. And I was in tears, I was in bits the whole week, because I was just, you know, it's the first time she's been away, and you almost feel as though you've lost that kind of when it comes to control, because you can't, you know, you're not there to look after them, you can't control what they do.
Well, wait till they go to university and they come back as grown-ups.
But as a parent, don't you then feel that, well, I should have enough confidence that I've brought up my child with enough respect, enough common sense to make the right decisions? Because I think that's where the parent's role really is. You know, you bring them up and hope that they, you know, absorb all of the good advice and the good, you know, teachings that you've given and passed on to them. But you have to just let them live their lives and use their own head and trust that you've done a good job.
You must have faith in your upbringing. I mean, you can, and you know, they are like sponges, aren't they? During that time, they will imbibe your values over a period of time, and then they may go to university and they may go away and make the wrong life decisions or different life decisions to what you would have expected them to. But that's their journey, and I think I always like to think that somewhere along the line, those values that you've brought them up with will come into play when they have their own children, or whenever it's right for them. That will come into play. You must have faith in yourself, in your faith, actually, if you brought them up within Sikhi as well, that there is that protection for them.
But saying something, just picking up on the point that you were making, Bal, there is, I have to be honest, there is a part of me that thinks that you know, respect deserves respect, and I think if you've had the privilege of having really good parents who've given you everything in life and given you all the opportunities, that actually to consider some of their views, and I'm not saying always agree with all their views, but to consider seriously their views and respectfully communicate your decisions to them, it's not going to take anything away from you. And I think what we sometimes see these days is in this desire to want to be independent or different, you know, what we get is a lot of young people thinking, oh, thanks very much for that, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And I think that's where parents feel a little bit, and that's where parents feel a little bit totally, you know, like, wow, what was all that about? You know, and I think we owe it to our parents to give them due respect for what they do for us as parents, and that doesn't mean always agreeing with them, but certainly communicating with them.
Definitely. But it's a two-way street, isn't it? So perhaps you lead by example as a parent, you respect your child, and then, you know, the respect will come that way.
Absolutely.
I think what parents do worry about is that, like, children are, in a way, a form of the representation of, you know, their upbringing. You know, the child represents the parent. So, you know, they feel that if they do rebel or they do something else, you know, maybe to other people, they do worry about what other people think. You know, that child is, you know, a form of them, and, you know, maybe they haven't done their job properly. That's how they feel.
But I have seen cases, I mean, I have seen situations where I've seen young women, particularly from Sikh backgrounds, who have had absolutely everything where their parents brought them up with all the respect, freedom, boundaries, and then they've gone off and made such appalling, you know, you get case studies like that, and from a psychological point of view, it's very interesting to see why did that individual actually end up, because they didn't come from a dysfunctional background, they actually came from a good background and still ended up making wrong decisions. And I think that's where it's all about back to karma, you know.
In our psyche, parents,
fate has a lot to do
I
with
think
it.
it's written, what's written for your destiny, if you believe in faith.
So you're saying no matter how good an upbringing, how much your parents
guarantee
you
it.
can't,
It's not guaranteed.
Do you know what it is?
See, this other thing with Asian parents is that if the children go slightly out of line, they take it like a personal failure, and it's not. It's not. Every parent tries their best within their limitation to be a good parent. It's so hard.
But
so it's not
that
a
where the
failure.
control factor comes in then?
Possibly, yes, because they don't want it to be seen, because their children are projections of them. They don't want to be seen to be failing.
So they're just almost trying to mould that child and control them.
Absolutely, it's
so
a
that
fear.
for the fear of that.
And really, all that parent can take responsibility for is their own actions and their own conduct and their own living and how they've treated. So don't stop living your own life whilst you're bringing your children's life, because at the end of the day, that's all you can be responsible for.
But sometimes I think parents take the role of parenting too seriously, and sometimes it's like a job. You need to remember that parenting, it's a relationship, it's not a role, it's not something, you know, you chose to be a parent, you know, you have to nourish a child, you have to form a relationship. If you can communicate and gain like a bond, and, you know, if you have that two-way love that you have with a child, then will they make the wrong decision? Will that happen? Maybe the parenting that some, you know, maybe the type of parenting that some, you know, parents are taking, maybe it's the way they're doing it. Maybe it's too much of a sort of robotic, sort of, you know, controlling.
It's emotional blackmail, isn't it? That's what we're talking about here. And I think children do it to parents, and parents do it to children.
I mean, you're still quite young, so you know. I mean, we're talking from a parent's perspective, you know, and I think maybe
of course. I'm on the verge of it.
But I think it's interesting because some of the views that are coming across from you,
it's very
youth,
isn't it?
You want to, you know, that. So this is how you perceive it, that it's a bonding thing. If you bond well, and you've obviously bonded well with your parents, you think that maybe helps the process where you don't have to be in control, because then the child will then automatically have that respect for you if you're treating them, you know, with that respect, the mutual respect, and they will then obviously hopefully following. You know,
we all wish that it would be ideal if it was just their parental upbringing, but the forces that come into play from society, from their peers, are so strong on them that it's difficult. And is there any human being who's going to go through their journey without making mistakes?
But the thing is, you'll fall back to, if you've had that upbringing that, you know, everyone should have, you may go through a rough patch, and maybe you will follow, you know, societal pressures or whatever, but you'll always go back to, you'll always think about it, you'll always remember what's important to you and the way your family brought up. When you're in that situation, when you are in a situation where you feel you have to make a decision, it's either like the wrong way or the right way, you will remember everything that
I
you've been
just tell
brought
you,
up
the
with.
other day I was laughing to one of my siblings now, and of course we've been through it all now, coming to that other side of the age. And we were laughing, and I said, I remember, you know, at 18 thinking you can conquer the world and the world's yours.
You know everything
You're
about
so
everything,
optimistic,
don't you, at
can't you?
18?
And so part of, you know, they don't say they don't say it for no reason, because actually that's just
It's a dangerous age.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes as parents we fear that, but actually it's one of the most wonderful ages. If you look back at your own time, it's great, because you're so ignorant of all the things, you know.
You're cynical and jaded.
And yeah, exactly. And you're not your potential isn't limited. You know, you don't think, I don't think I'll ever do that. I don't think, you know, at that age you think you can conquer the world, and actually it's nurturing that, as you're saying, and helping them through that journey that can make a real difference.
Definitely.
So that's why I feel like I've had sort of both parts. Like with my mum, I feel like she's very understanding. You know, she doesn't just tell me what to do, like, oh, I've done this, I know what I'm saying, you know, this is what you have to do. She'll live it with me, do you know what I mean? It's like she's with me, like,
make the right decision.
yeah, you know, and she'll help me, of course, but it's not control. But then there's the other side as well. That's why I'm saying, like, it's important to have that balance.
Absolutely.
It is important to have. Maybe control is the wrong word to use. Maybe we're not, you know, maybe it is used out of context, but I think it's important to have that sort of discipline and sort of that hard working, you know, that hard
but you've got
aspect
to
of it.
understand there's still some parents out there that very much live with the view that, you know, if I've given and invested so much in my child,
I expect
I expect
something back.
a certain amount back from them, and if I'm not getting that back, then I failed as a parent, and that child has failed to live up to his or her responsibilities as a child, you know. And I'm talking probably more from a Sikhi perspective, you know, maybe staying within the Sikhi sort of religion as opposed to anything else, maybe from that, you know, religious point of view, that, you know, they want them to do and abide by certain, you know, sort of
boundaries
rules within Sikhi, and if that child doesn't, then they're saying, well, everything I did, well, then does that mean that you're doing it all because of Sikhi, or
But
are
I
you
don't
doing it
mean
because
to-
you want the best, you know, for your child?
I remember when I was growing up, because I was so lucky to go back and forth to India, I would often have those intellectual conversations with my mum, and she'll say, I'll be like, but what happened? Which say, you know, and I'll challenge it. And I think it's the intent. If your parents are doing it purely because they are actually teaching you about the values and the culture and your history, then that's a positive thing. But if they're using it to control you as an individual and your will and what you're going to do and what's my payback, thank you very much, then I think that's what you're going to get back, you know, and you're going to lose your children. So I think I think it's about how you use religion and culture to support.
And they
support
will
your
make their choice. Whatever they'll be their own people. No two siblings are the same.
That's
You know, and they can have completely different aspirations and personalities. It depends what they are like, and some people are spiritual and some people aren't. So even with Sikhi, so you could do exactly the same for all children, and they all turn out different. So it's a journey.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a great conversation, a great chat about, you know, just something light-hearted about, you know, this control thing with parents and children. But as you say, Vina, and as you rightly said, every individual, you know, child is different, and as you said, and maybe if they're nurtured and they're treated with the respect, they'll obviously return that respect back as well. So yeah, no, it's been a great conversation, so thank you for that, ladies.
Thank you.
Right, so if you want to get involved in the show, or if you want to give us any feedback about the chat that we've had today, certainly get in contact with us. As parents, we'd like to hear from you. What do you think about, you know, children and how you're investing in your children? Should you be able to control what they do, who they marry, for example? And also, as children, how do you feel? Do you think that your parents have got a right to tell you what you should do and who you marry and what, you know, where you should go in your career? So please get in touch with us if you want, if you want to give us any feedback. We'd be more than happy to receive that feedback. But I think for today, ladies, thank you for that, and I think we'll leave it there.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.